Sitting down for another episode with my brother where he is going to open the books. He's going to share his poker results and share his stats. He's a top-ranked poker player in the world, so I know a lot of people are going to be interested in that. We're also talking the 2025 World Series of Poker. A lot of controversies this year, some potential rule changes. I'm also going to be sharing my stats from this year's World Series of Poker. So let's hop in, and I hope you enjoy this episode of the Skill Game Podcast.
I'ma give it all I got, I'm grinding every day, ain't no other way.
All right, back for another edition of the Skill Game Podcast. We're going to be wrapping up the World Series of Poker. I'm with my favorite co-host, Andrew Moreno. Let's just start from the top. There's so many storylines from this World Series of Poker. It was the year of the villain.
Yeah, this whole Kassouf and Martin Cabral, even this guy Eric Afriat, I'd say is definitely a villain. He was getting quite a bit of coverage. I can say from my perspective, I did not love it. It was not something that I was particularly interested in. I think for someone like myself, or I'll just speak for myself, like as a longtime professional, what I'm most interested in is like the X's and O's of the game, the strategy, the high level play mixed with like a lot of the exploits that are done. And I'm sure like a lot of cool stories I like to follow, but typically they're not like the villain arc. I don't know. To me, it's like, it's almost like a circus. It like detracts from the game. It also kind of promotes this, it's like we're saying like, we like this, like we want this behavior, we're condoning it. And I just feel like, maybe next year, I feel like we're going to have like a 5 or 10% increase in people just being obnoxious.
Yeah, I'm privy to some of the poker media chats, and there was a lot of discussion on how much those people and the media would cover people that were being obtuse, people that were being loud. Obviously, Martin Cabral was on a sick run. He was winning a lot of He was winning final tabling, big tournaments. He won the $1,000 buy-in mini main event that had somewhere around 10,000 entries in it. So that's obviously an amazing feat for him to perform well, not only in the high roller, but perform well in a big field, medium buy-in tournament, which is your specialty, obviously. But so I can understand wanting to cover him from that perspective, but a lot of the high-level pros don't like him. And it's funny, I was actually on break, and there was a high-level pro in the break area, and somebody from Poker Media came up to him and said, "Hey, do you have a second to chat for a poker interview?" And he's like, "Sure, yeah, what's up?" And he goes, "I want to talk to you about Martin Cabral." And he goes, "Nope." And he's just like about face, turned and walked away. So that kind of tells you how much the pros don't like playing with him. And it's beyond that he's a good player. Obviously, he slows down the game. He's talking in every hand, and he's talking when he's not even in a hand. And I was thinking about how, from a perspective of a viewer, it's kind of entertaining, and it's kind of interesting to just like have action, because like poker's pretty slow, pretty boring from a spectator's perspective, because each hand takes a couple minutes to happen, and he's kind of carrying those couple minutes a little bit. But I actually played with him once this summer, only for maybe 30 minutes before he ended up busting. But in that 30 minutes, it was kind of fun, kind of funny. He was lighthearted. He wasn't really being a jerk to anyone. But I know that his energy is relentless, and it can last all day, 10 hours, 12 hours throughout the whole day. So I could see 30 minutes was like getting kind of tiring, where you're kind of always engaged in what he's saying. I could see it being 10 hours being like very tiring. And this is actually something that I was thinking about in chess and in poker and all these other mind sport games. There's not really a lot of trash talking going on, like when it's someone's move in chess, the other person's being quiet. I think that there has been some of that though, where there's like people trying to be annoying to throw the other person off their game. Because Will Kassouf came on later in the tournament, we'll talk more about him, but his conversations at the table and his talking while in a hand with another opponent was so overwhelming and so annoying that I could imagine being an opponent in a hand against him. Like, how do you think?
Poker's a very simple game. If you have it, I don't have it. If I have it, you don't have it. Very simple. If you don't have it, I have it. If you have it and I have it, this is what they call a cooler. But this time I have it. Nut. Gamble with the nuts, with resources, monkey with the absolute coconuts. You can't make it up. Nuts, monkey nuts, coconuts. No. There we go.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, you're trying to think of ranges, you're trying to think, what was the action on the flop? What was his bet sizing? What did he do in previous streets on, like, what did he do in previous hands when he used that bet size? Like, you're trying to think, right? And he's in your ear constantly. How do you think?
Yeah, I think that's why we saw a lot of earplugs at those tables. And I think also we're kind of seeing kind of like a strong counteraction to what we've seen in poker, which is that, you know, we had all these like Christoph Vogel sayings and, you know, basically the people that like, you look at them, you're like, this guy's a robot. You know, this is like he's a character that sits there. He's basically a machine that sits there, and there's no emotion. There's nothing vibrant about this character, and it's kind of like a Terminator. Like, he's sent there to just destroy, and that's it. And so, you know, we're almost seeing like the pendulum swing back the other way with someone like Martin Cabral or Kassouf, where it's like, you know, oh, what about all the characters we used to have in poker, like, you know, the Grinder, like Daniel Negreanu, Kid Poker, all these kind of like, everyone had this sort of like, you know, Phil Locke, the magician. There was like this character, there was this energy that exuded that was very different from each player. And I feel like there's very clearly the public is speaking and saying like, we want that in some way, shape, or form. And I think at the end of the day, the numbers don't lie. Like, if you're looking at Poker Go and you're wondering, like, why are they putting these guys on so much? They must be getting the numbers. These are businesses. They're trying to make money. At the end of the day, like, the people have spoken.
Speech play has always been a part of poker. It's more so a thing in cash games. In tournaments, they tried to legislate it out of the game. They were saying like things like, in tournaments, you can't say what your holdings are. You can't even lie about your holdings. You can't tell the truth. Nothing about your holdings, or your hand could be declared dead. You can't ask another player what their holdings are. They really, for a couple years, were adding rules to the rule book in tournaments so that basically eliminating speech play. I know people like Daniel Negreanu have been against those kind of rules because speech play is kind of fun, but and it's an element of psychology, and it's an element of the game where you're kind of trying to get in the opponent's head, trying to trick them or steer them in a decision that you want. Obviously, sometimes it works, sometimes it can backfire. If you're not skilled at speech play, I would definitely never recommend doing it. As someone who's been a part of the game for a long time and played a lot of cash games, I'm generally feel pretty confident with my speech play, but I probably wouldn't even try it in a tournament, honestly.
Well, in the main event on day 7 or something where
you're nervous.
You're afraid to give away anything.
Yeah.
One thing that just came to me is that I imagine that at least partially why there's been all these hard rules around not having speech play in tournaments is that you're really trying to protect the integrity of the game. And, you know, who's to say that, like, if I'm in a hand against you, like, maybe I can say something that, you know, if I say this one thing, then that means this. Like, we can potentially share information about cards that we had. We could potentially be just outright cheating and, you know, saying like, okay, like, I have a hand that is like, when I say this, basically I have a hand that's like very strong or is not strong.
Yeah.
And like I can chip dump to you, or you can make a big fold to me. What, you know, these kind of things where like you wouldn't be able to do that maybe on like a stream if, you know, because we can see the cards or whatever. So, I mean, look, that's probably not happening. That's probably not going to happen. But the truth is, like, if they just have like this blanket statement out and say, hey, you can't do that ever, you know, you remove that possibility of people manipulating the rules. So there may be some element of that as well. We always think about game integrity. Yeah,
I'm curious what the audience thinks about speech play and its role in tournaments. Obviously, there is a line where when you cross over, you're now badgering the other opponent. And Will Kassouf was someone that clearly crossed that line so many times. And Cabral has been towing that line basically since he's come on the scene. The Kassouf stuff was so clearly badgering opponents and being out of line in a way where it was impossible to think if you're the other opponent, because he literally would never shut up when it's your turn to act. There was a couple of hands where his conversation was so nonsensical that even like trying to tune it out, it's hard to even think on what you want to do with your own hand and have your own thought process and about the game. So I can see why speech play was eliminated, because there are people like Kassouf that will take it too far. And that's clearly a case of them taking it too far. And the World Series, say what you want, and I'm curious what people think of World Series' parenting style when it came to
That's what it was parenting.
when it came to Will Kassouf, because they were putting him on clocks, pre-flop even, post-flop even, 10-second clocks, because they felt like his speech play was slowing down the game so much that they had to penalize him for it. And there was one big hand where he played where he had the nut straight on the river, and he had a 10-second action clock on the river when the board paired. And he's obviously hasn't slept in days. He may be on some sort of upper. I don't know what's going on with this guy. He's crashing out on live TV. And he has to make a decision for a big amount of chips, overbet on the river with a straight. Clearly he made the wrong decision because he folded a straight and the guy was bluffing. And if he had more time to think about it, then maybe he would not have made the fold. But he did it to himself.
Yeah. So something else that people don't really think about that's actually really important here is that, especially in the main event, especially at this stage of the tournament, this is true in all tournaments, but especially here, is that the longer you're in the tournament, the more money you make. And so if you're at Will Kassouf's table and you play 20% less hands, you are more likely to move further in the tournament, even marginally, when it's like, you might be on a $25,000 pay jump, you might be on a $100,000 pay jump at that point. So it's like, if my table at Will Kassouf's table is in 1 hour plays 6 less hands than your table, you're at a huge disadvantage. You're way more likely to, you're at least somewhat more likely to have an elimination at your table when they're on that $100,000 pay jump, for example. And you take that over the course of an entire day when he's at your table, like actually playing slow is a big benefit for you. And so from the World Series perspective, like that's an unfair advantage.
Yeah.
You're talking about like these massive pay jumps. So in my opinion, mainly what they're policing is pace of play and making sure that they're fair to all the other tables, because without the action clocks, I don't know if they're actually tracking how many hands are taking place at each table. They oftentimes do late in tournaments. But without those action clocks, the disparity can just be night and day. You may have, over the course of the entire day, Will Kassouf's table play like 30% of the hands as the table that played the most, which is just egregious.
Which brought up a ton of conversation on X about action clocks. And now that the World Series of Poker actually does have tablets at every table, there was a lot of discussion. It's like, we need to have action clocks so that people aren't stealing EV from other players by slowing down the pace of play. Because right now, you are incentivized to play slower in a lot of situations. And there's no real effective measure of policing that other than your table mates calling the clock on you. The problem is your table mates are also incentivized for slow play. So the discussion of action clocks being mandatory in upcoming tournaments, especially when once in the money, came up. And it sounds like it definitely is more feasible now that there are tablets on the tables. So I could see that happening in future tournaments. We saw a situation with Ike Haxton where he bet all of his chips except for one big blind, which is standard practice in high roller tournaments. Players do this all the time. Normally they have an action clock though in these high roller tournaments. So if they have 6 time banks of 30 seconds apiece and they're on a pay jump and it's a significant, there's a significant chance that they will likely bust, they will take their time. Might as well. You have 6 extensions. So 6 times 30, you're looking at a couple minutes of stalling. And that's within the rules of the game, you know. It's also within the rules of the game when there is no action clock. So what you're relying on is your table mates calling the clock to make it fair for the other tables in the tournament. Problem is that the longer that they take, they're disincentivized to call the clock. So does that mean that the dealer should have power to be able to call the clock? Like, are we giving dealer that power? Or are we adding auction clocks? There was a lot of discussion about it this summer, and I'm interested to see what the WSOP does going forward, because whenever there's an outcry and an abuse of the rules, that's when changes happen. I think that this year was kind of the first year that it came to light that there is some abusing of slow play. And when you talk about one of the things about speech play is that could be potentially happening is chip dumping or collusion or a code word for I have a strong hand, or, you know, things like that. There was a big controversy at the WSOP this year between two guys who more than likely
they were banned, so
they were chip dumping. Two guys got heads up in a tournament, and WPT was running a promotion where if you were wearing their patch at one of these final tables, the Monster Star or the Millionaire Maker was one of those final tables, and if you won that tournament, you got an extra $1 million payout. So they were playing for like 1.2 and like 900,000, something in that range, like a combined prize pool of 2.2 million. One of the players had that patch on. And if that player won, there's an extra $1 million that player got. So now instead of a $2.2 million prize pool, the prize pool has been artificially inflated to a $3.2 million prize pool. Players go on break. Players allegedly have a discussion about this this wrinkle inflating the prize pool. Players come back from break. The guy who's at a disadvantage is the one wearing the patch. He's like
a big chip deficit, right?
Yeah,
like
10,
5 to 1 or 10 to 1.
I think it's like 10 to 1.
Okay,
it's a big disadvantage. He now goes on a rampage of bluffing. And he's bluffing for sizings that are odd numbers. I don't remember, it was an even number was like value, odd number was bluff, or vice versa. And the other player at the table who had the chip lead, Jesse, Yagam, whatever, he's now folding when the guy's bluffing. Or, I'm sorry, yeah, he's folding when the guy's bluffing. I'm sorry. He's basically dumping chips based on the other guy's signals. And he chips away from that disadvantage to go have the advantage, and all without being all in, which is kind of unheard of.
Yeah.
So what happens is he ends up winning the tournament. WSOP kind of catches wind of this. Like, you can tell that something is going on.
Poker players are sharp. Like, you watch that heads-up match, and like, not only do we know pretty much right away that something happened in terms of like a deal was struck, but very quickly after, people are coming up with this theory on like the odd versus even, and like poker players are sharp. They're like, well, how do they figure this out? They just, you know, they can work back. And we're not saying for certain that that's what happened, but like, seems pretty clear that they were using a strategy like that. Well, the one thing that I heard, again, and this is speculation, so I'd love to, you know, again, take it with a grain of salt, do your own research. But what I heard where they really got into trouble was that they approached the guy in third place and said, hey, do you want in on this deal? Because like, you know, if we let Jesse survive and like we, you know, potentially like get him to win, like we could make a deal and now like lock us money up for all of us. And that player said no. That's where I think the ban came in, is because the argument that I heard, or that makes sense to me, is like, I think it was Patrick Leonard was like, the tournament was basically over. It's basically like they did a deal. They said, okay, here's the deal. Boom, we're going to play it out. The tournament's over. It's just 2 players left. There's no one stealing EV from anyone. They made the deal. It was their money between the 2 of them. They could make whatever deal they like. Sure, that made a lot of sense to me. And so I think if this were actually true, that something like this happened where they're manipulating a third party.
Yeah, because by definition, collusion must involve 3 players. Collusion means that 2 players are actively working together to steal money from a third player or more players.
Yeah.
And since there was only 2 players left in the event, by the letter of the law, collusion can't take place because there has to be
There's
a third
no
player.
one for them to cheat.
There's no one for them to cheat.
Yeah.
You know, so what they're doing is they are cheating the prize basically. They're cheating WPT in a way, but there was a lot of discussion about like, well, this diminishes the World Series of Poker brand because now they're basically making a mockery of something that's considered like a world championship, you know? And I think that's why WPT wanted to protect their brand as well. Involving a third player obviously is grounds for a ban. But they also wanted to protect their brand and say that like this kind of thing can't really happen. So I understand why the ban happened. I think from a poker player's perspective, I think it's unfortunate because poker players are taught, it's inside of us, to maximize our EV within the rules of the game. So since there is no collusion and they decided that, and WSOP doesn't allow for deal making, because otherwise they would have just said, hey, we want to make a deal. WSOP facilitate the deal for us. Since WSOP doesn't facilitate that, they kind of had to go like on their own. And so I understand why they did it. And I think it's unfortunate. I don't really blame them for what they did because they're maximizing their EV and they're not cheating any other players. What they're doing is they're stealing money from a corporation and perhaps diminishing the WSOP brand.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that comes to mind really quickly to jump back to the whole, leaving a chip behind thing kind of made me think of like poker being a zero-sum game. In this case, these 2 players were kind of like stealing EV from a corporation, which a lot of people were like, yeah, fuck those corporations. This makes sense. Let's do that. But in the other case, with leaving a chip behind, you are taking EV from other players. It's a zero-sum game. And what that means is that, let's just make it personal. Let's say that your mom is in the main event, and she's over there playing at another table, and Isaac Haxton has 1 chip. We'll just use him because that was the example that was portrayed on TV, which is what happened. He had 1 chip left. All the chips were in the waiting. He's waiting for 10 minutes. And there's 1 chip left, and there's been, 4 hands that took place at your mom's table. Your mom gets all in. She busts. He throws his 1 chip in. Your mom makes 100,000 less because he sat there for 10 minutes with his 1 chip. So again, maybe it's not your mom, maybe it's the guy you don't like, maybe it's you, maybe it's someone that you bought a piece of. And at the end of the day, like protecting people, it's a zero-sum game where if you're looking at it from one perspective where Ike is taking that EV, he's taking it from someone else that's not very likely not playing the same game, or at least to that degree, potentially. And so I think, seeing some rule changes will be good for that. Also, just wanted to kind of mention that briefly.
Yeah, we need the changes because we can't expect when incentives aren't aligned, we can't expect people to do the right thing and call the clock in the case on Ike. Getting back to the WSOP versus WPT, I mean, let's call it a beef because it sounds like a beef. We got the 2 probably, I would say, biggest operators in terms of.
You got the good guy and you got the bad guy.
Who's the good guy?
You guys know who the good guy is. Don't make me say it.
All right, well, WPT is giving away a lot of money. They're competing for market share with WSOP in the live tournament realm, having big stops, big guarantees. There was a guarantee at the Win a couple years back for like 30 million or 40 million, something insane. And WSOP is not going to sit back and just allow them to try to steal market share from them. So they, a couple years ago, ran that huge 25K where they gave away all these seats and tried to steal. They basically ran a competing series against WPT. And there's kind of been this back and forth between those 2 companies on not really coordination, the opposite of coordination. It's like you're running a tournament series here at this time. We're going to run a competing tournament series over here in the Bahamas at this exact same time and try to steal the player pool. And it bubbled up with this promotion at the final table. And both companies seem to be doing great. So I don't know what's going to happen in the future here. If it's going to continue to be this like East Coast versus West Coast beef where someone's going to get hurt.
I mean, the thing about it for me is like the good guy versus the bad guy. Good guy clearly being WPT, bad guy WSOP, GG. The thing is, like, you have this series, springs up in the desert around Christmas time, wildly successful. Nothing else is going on at that time. They're not stealing market from anyone else. They're just like looking at, hey, Vegas is really nice this time of year. Like, there's a lull in tournaments around this time of year. Maybe we could build something really big. They start to build it. It starts to be successful. And then GG comes in and says, and WSOP come in and say, oh, you guys, okay, that was a good idea. Let's just come in and like, let's not only try to like take a piece of that pie, let's try to take the entire pie. And even though you guys started it, you were building something great. It was at the Wynn. It was great dealers, beautifully run. If you've been to WSOP events, you know that their thing is typically like, get as many people as we can. We'll throw a bunch of new dealers in there. Mm-hmm. You get like cheap ballroom chairs. Everything is like, you know, kind of the bare minimum expense. Well, WPT and the Wynn had like the opposite approach, where it was like you had like top-notch dealers, beautiful ballroom, you know, great experience, like everything really catered. And so, you know, with WSOP coming in, kind of trying to completely ruin that, in my opinion, really made me feel like I didn't want to go play at the Bahamas. They incentivized me. There was like a promotion running where I could have like basically stayed at the hotel at, I believe it was Atlantis, for like 2 weeks for free. Mm-hmm. And even had like a free buy-in to some tournament. And I just said no, because being principled and like not liking what they're doing, obviously you guys know that I've done well at the Wynn, but it's just a great place to play. I love the people that work there. It's everything about it's great. So I'm choosing to endorse that, but it's hard. It's hard to say no to free money, to free all these things. And who knows, maybe if we don't see a ceasefire, like we may see one of these companies really just crash and burn at the time.
At the end of the day, this is America. You know, it's a capitalistic country, and competition within business is expected, and competition within business is generally good for the consumer. And WPT and WSOP have been competing, so they've been doing some good things to try to win business. And you know, they're not the only two competitors. Actually, PokerStars is making a push to enter the U.S. market. You know, they're purchased by another entity, and they're running the NAPT, trying to bring that back. I know that they're doing that in the fall. So at the end of the day, competition is good for the consumer. So live poker in terms of poker tournaments is alive and thriving in terms of the options that we have and how many people are showing up to the tournaments. We had nearly 10,000 people play the main event this year. We had, and that's in the face of America kind of closing its borders, not officially closing its borders, but closing its borders in a way where the rest of the country is not real happy with, or the rest of the world is not real happy with us right now.
Just real quick, one thing about the 10,000, almost 10,000 people in the main event, talk about like these other tournaments that get, you know, maybe like 10,000 runners or whatever. These are uniques. In the main event, it's a $10,000 buy-in freeze out, which means you get one entry. So if there's almost 10,000 people in there, that means 10,000 people showed up and played that tournament. If you're looking at a tournament that, let's just call it the Monster Stack, let's say it had 10,000 entries, that's probably something like half that, you know, roughly, because those people are re-entering on multiple days, trying to maybe fire one more bullet that day, or you know, maybe the following day. So to get that many people in one tournament that's a $10,000 buy-in, that's the World Championship, is just speaks to that.
Yeah, it was a big tournament. I obviously played the main event this year. It did not go my way, but my first day one starting table was filled with recreational players taking a shot, and it wasn't like pro infested or reggy or anything like that. So it's a reminder that, like, you know, poker is still a game where everyone wants to kind of take their shot, and the World Championships brings the people out.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the guy that I believe he finished 10th, Padron, like, you know, you get a lot of these guys that are inexperienced, male and female, recreational players. They show up, and they play some good cards. They get some good distribution. They do things well, even though they're not studied. And they're able to string together many good decisions over a few days. But ultimately, what happens very often is that they'll make some catastrophic mistake because they're not studied and they don't have the experience. And then they end up, busting in the tournament. And so one of the things that came up, I was on Twitter just a few days ago, and the guy that finished in 10th place, he made a play that was very clearly just a mistake that he shouldn't have made, that was a hand that busted him from the tournament. In my opinion, it was a very big mistake in terms of like the mistakes that you can make in poker.
Yeah.
So
There was a couple series of mistakes too, where like he could have gotten a bigger stack, made some big folds. So it was like a 3-hand sequence that played out to have him have a lot of chips to bust in the tournament, and I'm sure he feels horrible.
Yeah, and I just feel like, I'm all for, as a community, like, we talk about hands, we throw them up and say, hey, look at this hand. This hand was like sick. This guy played this hand sick. This one was a torch. Like, I think we need to be able to have that conversation and be honest about like the good and the bad. I'm not the guy here to say like we shouldn't criticize. What I think was missing in that initial post from that player was that, we can be critical of people's play, but we also need to keep in mind like these people are not professionals, a lot of them. This is the biggest moment of their life, very likely, at least their poker career, obviously. This was like at the end of 8 or 9 days in a row, which they're probably not even sleeping, or, the accumulation of day after day of like stress, anxiety, lack of sleep. Like there are things that happen like that, that we're not necessarily like experiencing as we're watching this hand unfold. And like, just keep like, we're all poker players. Like I know how bad that feels to like torch it at a big spot. And then you multiply that by 10 because it's the biggest stage in the world for the most amount of money, life-changing money.
Yeah.
And I think like having a little empathy, in that sort of critical message that you're saying about, hey, this guy really torched it. I think you can also just have a little bit of compassion for that person and like acknowledge the human element and be kind to some degree, but also be critical. Like I just feel like this is the way I've always thought about it. It's like I work here. This is my company. Like this is where my business is. I go in. These are my coworkers. These are my peers. Like I don't want to work in a toxic environment. I don't want to live and breathe every day in an environment that's like a high school and you're talking about Susie and Susie's talking about Billy and did you see what that guy wore and this and that. Like you live in that and you work and breathe in that and like you get sick. That goes in you. And so I've always thought about it in like, okay, well I'll just like be that kind of like good energy, that good space that like when I go into work, like I radiate that, like I try to permeate that. And because it's like, I take ownership and responsibility and say, this is my company too. Like I work here. So that's been my whole approach. I think some people, people saw my response and said, hey, like we should be able to be honest and call a spade. And a lot of people were like, yeah, we need to, have a little bit of empathy. And I think the discourse was really good. There was a lot of good conversation around that.
Yeah, I made a response to it, but I think that in general, when you're seeing somebody on TV or social media, a lot of times people disconnect that that's a real person. And they don't really put themselves in that person's shoes. Like this guy was not a professional player and he was, like you said, at one of the biggest moments of his poker career, and he probably wants to take back some of those hands, and he's feeling horrible. Think about how like horrible you're feeling after that, feeling like you gave away your main event, and then you open up your phone and just everybody ripping you apart. That's gotta feel terrible. And I was thinking about like professional athletes go through this all the time. Imagine like missing the shot in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, and you open it up and everybody's like, this guy's horrible. He, just like the names that you get called. I don't care who you are. You never fully get used to the world hating you.
Yeah, but those guys, I agree with you, but also they've been in the spotlight very often since they were in middle school or high school. they've been in those high pressure moments, had success and failure that has like really shaped them a lot through that upbringing into the professional sports. And so when they are in that Super Bowl as like, you know, the starting quarterback, for example, and they miss the throw or throw the pick, like they really like might just get back there next year or the year after, or very often do. You know, this is like the equivalent of like the high school quarterback making it to the Super Bowl, playing against and throwing the pick in the end zone. And then it's like, yeah, you could get back next year or in 10 years, but like, you know, you're playing against like the Patriots who have like Tom Brady and this and that. So
another thing that came up on X that you shared, and speaking to creating a harmonious work environment, you know, because poker is your work. You were deep in a tournament. Last we left off, you were down a lot of money in the World Series, but directly after that taping that we had of our last episode, you had a deep run at the win. And I'm setting the stage here. There was like maybe 15 players left or so in the tournament, maybe 12. And I'll let you take it from here, but there was a situation where you felt like you did the right thing, and you posted about it on Twitter to kind of get some feedback from the poker world on, you know, some of the things that you were thinking about, if it was the right thing, if it wasn't the right thing. So I'll let you go ahead and talk about it.
Yeah, it was, we were at the final table of it was a $3,000 buy-in. First place is like $1 million. It's like eighth place is like, I don't know, maybe like 120K or something. So we're starting to get there with the big pay jumps, and like every decision is just so much equity involved. And there's one overwhelming chip leader who's like a Russian pro who plays high rollers. I've never met this guy. I don't really know him at all. He's been getting, a lot of us, we're not allowed to use our phones. So you get up from the table, you walk away, use your phone, you come back. And he had moved far away enough from the table, and the cards were being dealt, that I realized like he's gonna miss this hand. And so like in a moment, I kind of like look around the table. I have like maybe a second to like think, shit, should I like say something to like bring this guy back to the table? Because he's the big chip leader.
Yeah.
If I don't call him back to the table, like I'm in the big blind. If it folds to him and he's not there, like I go from playing, you know, something like 30% of hands to maybe like 50 or 60% of hands. Like it's just so good for me to like be able to play a pot that he's potentially not in, where he's gonna very likely be in very often. So like immediately I recognize, oh shit, this is really good for me if he's not here. But I was like, you know what, I don't know this guy, but like I feel like the right thing to do is to call him back. So
good sportsmanship would be to,
I think it's kind of the right thing to do. Was my instinct in the moment. So I said, Artur, and I called him back to the table. He runs back. The cards are already dealt. Like they probably could have killed his hand already, but they let it slide. Long story short, he ends up playing a big pot against this young kid who isn't like has a big stack as well. He's the chip leader. He stacks the kid, and Archer gets extremely lucky and you know, busts this guy because he didn't have the best hand. This other kid did, and then he rivered a good hand, and the rest is history. But the interesting part that I thought was like, as the kid's kind of like up from the table and kind of like in a shock of like what just happened, he was just kind of offhanded said like, wow, what if we like didn't call him back to the table? Like, because like, you know, this is the biggest spot of this kid's life. He's a young kid. I think he's had some results, but like the equity in that pot and in his stack at that time is greater than he's ever experienced. And, you know, he's just kind of like in this moment of like, fuck, like, you know, maybe if I hadn't said that, like this hand never happens. Obviously, like he could have just won the pot and doubled. And that's, a lot of people said like, oh, he's being result oriented, or like somehow that he was like feeling angry with me. He was not at all feeling angry with me. There was like this reflection and this kind of like look in his eye of just like, holy shit, like that was crazy how lucky this guy just got. I just like had this really good hand I couldn't fold. And then it was like just an exploration on the thought of like, wow, if he just misses that hand, I just, like I'm gonna get like top 3 a lot here, you know, and it just, and then the kind of what I brought to X, the thing that I think is interesting to think about is like, how much should we inject ourselves into situations that we're not necessarily directly a part of.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, you were directly impacted. You were in the big blind.
I was, but I mean, in terms of like the way it played out, like
Yeah.
it ended up like largely just like me injecting myself into something that mattered like not at all to me, but greatly
Yeah.
to someone else. And so the question I kind of pose to people is like, did I do the right thing? Like, what's your opinion on, you know, should we intervene in some of these situations where like it's very likely going to affect others but not us. In my case it was going to, but it just didn't. And yeah, that tweet got a lot of action, and I had people approach me and think a lot about it. And the cool thing about poker, I think we have such a great community, and like the conversations around a lot of this stuff I think are largely really healthy. I had both sides, people saying like, you definitely shouldn't say something, you definitely should. At the end of the day, the way that I kind of like left that sort of interaction on X feeling was like, I'm happy I did what I did in terms of like, I did what I thought was right in the moment. And like, that's kind of like how you live your poker life. It's like, the information I had at the time, I like thought I was doing the right thing. And like, maybe I could look at it after and say it was good or bad or right or wrong, but like, I'm happy that I did what I thought was right. And in this case, it ended up being very bad for this person, but.
Yeah. Last we talked, so in this tournament, in this particular tournament, you were the chip leader for a while, and you ended up in 5th place for a $320,000 or $30,000 score, 40,000, something in that range. So that basically turned around your summer, and it actually is a good segue to talk a little bit about your results from this past summer, because up until that point you were down how much?
I think I was down around 80 between online
Yeah.
and cash and live tournaments. And I cashed that tournament. I final tabled like a nightly tournament with like 600 players in it. And then I finished in 10th at the Aria main.
It's all in the span of like 4 days.
Yeah, like all in that 1 week. And so then I went from like minus 80 to like plus maybe 350 to 400.
Yeah.
And then played towards, lost a bit more during the end of the summer, and I ended up making 320 between live, online, buying pieces and swapping. But just in my play, it was plus around 250 between live and online. So, that's great. I'm obviously super happy about that. However, it's like, one small decision that I could have made different that I very likely should have, in like the Aria main where first place was $1 million and I'm chip leader with like 13 players left and I get 10th, it's really easy to like obsess over that and, lose sleep.
Yeah.
But I feel grateful. I'm happy with that. It's definitely some hands that I wish that I could have had back for sure.
So that's like 50, let's call it 50 days of poker in a row. And your routine in that 50 days was pretty extreme. You were maybe at the house until 10 a.m., from like 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., making tea, having breakfast, and then you were out the door and you weren't back until 2 in the morning pretty much every day for 50 days in a row.
I'm tired.
Yeah, and
Green Mile.
that's what I wanted to ask you. Out of those 50 days, what percentage of those nights, let's call it 49 nights, were you stressed going to bed?
Yeah, and I'll answer that question. I also wanted to say that I played 92 bullets in 41 tournaments, so I kept that. But yeah, the interesting thing about being a tournament player is I'd say like 95% of the tournaments that I played, I was not over starting stack for most of those bullets. If I was, it was for a very short amount of time. I like didn't make day 2 or didn't cash for like 95% of those bullets. And so, if you're thinking over the course of, call it 45, 50 days, 95% of those days I go home and I'm like, I lost all day, got no chips together, lost every pot, bluffs all getting called, value bets all getting raised or called by better hands. I go home stressed, frustrated, annoyed, and then for 1 week that doesn't happen. And then I have a pretty big summer.
But
Yeah.
even in that week that it doesn't happen, from an outsider's perspective looking in, it felt like the bust out at the Aria was one of the low points for you this summer,
Yeah.
like emotionally, which is interesting because it's one of the tournaments where you made the most money.
Yeah.
So you can never really escape the torture of tournaments, even
Yeah.
when you make a lot of money. In some cases, when you're making a lot of money, it's even more torturous.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing that we do as tournament poker players. Like, I know that we're a strange breed because you're just set up to be sad or angry or annoyed basically all the time. And there's something about it that keeps pulling us back in. And it's weird, I can say that and it like makes no sense, but I'm like, oh, they're gonna get it. When I say this, they're gonna understand what I'm saying. And, you know, a part of it is, for me, is like, it's like the roller coaster ride, you know, it's like those high points. Like in the Aria tournament, I came in with a short stack and I was like, ended up being like maybe the chip leader, like leading into the bubble, which was like 4 hours later. And it was like being able to play basically 100% of hands for like 3 hours and win basically every pot, making huge bluffs and stacking people and like, you know, going from like being basically like a part of the wallpaper to like being a prominent force into this poker tournament. That experience is like, you go home at the end of the night and you're like, you know, that one day was like, wow, man, that was powerful. That was an experience, you know? So you're like, go, you know, however it ends or whatever, then you play the next tournament. You remember like, oh man, that was great. Let me like play this tournament. Hopefully I can experience that again.
Yeah, something that comes up for me is, and tell me what you think about it, but I feel like in life, when our expectations start to raise, however high the expectation was, creates an equal proportionate amount of pain. So when you go through that Aria tournament and you start to have the chip lead, the bubble play, chip leader, 15 players left, 13 players left, your expectations start to raise. You're like, I'm in a good spot to win this tournament in the win. You're like, I'm in a good spot to win this tournament. And now the gap between winning and busting creates that much more pain. And it's something that I've heard, and I'll just echo it right here. The reason we experience suffering is because life doesn't match our expectation. And poker tournaments gives you this unique opportunity to have an insane expectation because of how things are going.
Yeah, the one thing I push back on, I would say that the fucked up part is that it's not equal. It's like the thrill of winning does not equal like the pain of losing in that same spot. You know, like it's going to be something for me like 5 to 10 times worse to, you know, have a bad result at that point than like having the best result would be. And I think that's pretty typical for people, and that's part of the thing that makes poker, especially tournaments, like so difficult. But, you know, again, it's what we love, and, you know, I'm curious about you because I know you haven't played a bunch this summer and like leading up to this year, and then you played most days. You seem to be making runs in most tournaments, and yet what were your results at the end of the...
Yeah, so you mentioned that you'd played like 91 bullets.
I believe so, yeah.
So I played slightly less than a third of that. I played 27 bullets over the course of like 20 tournaments. And out of those 27 bullets, I had 11 cashes, which I think the most cashes this summer was 15 from anyone. So I was in the, you know, having a good cash rate, over 40% cash rate, which is obviously insane. And when you do have those cashes and you are all in on the bubble with pocket jacks and a big stack against ace king, and you win that flip, and then all of a sudden you're the chip leader with 120 players left in a tournament where there's 800,000 for first place, you start to have those expectations, you know? So I would say that the being chip leader a couple times, I was actually chip leader in the 777 tournament as well with 100 and, maybe it wasn't the 7-7 tournament. There was 2 tournaments where I was chip leader with like 150 players left. So you start to feel like, oh, this could be like one of the ones where I finally make a World Series of Poker final table. I mentioned in the last episode, my deepest runs in World Series have been a 30th place and a 31st place. So, wanting to eclipse that, wanting to get to the final table was something that was in my mind. And I got a 73rd place a couple weeks back. And then just a couple days ago in the 777 tournament, I ended up getting 79th place out of a field of over 8,000 entries. So that's over 99% of the field I outlasted, but you really need to outlast everyone except for the last 5 to 10 players to make a lot of money. So what ended up happening was I had like $50,000 in buy-ins and like $41,000 in cashes. So I ended up losing $9,500 over the summer. Most of that was, one tournament's the main event. My average buy-in was like $1,900. Main event is obviously $10,000. Did not cash that tournament. That's the difference between me winning 500 and losing 9,500. I did swap with someone in the 777 when we were deep. He ended up getting 11th, so won a little bit there. I bought someone into the main event. They won $25,000. They were in makeup, so I got that whole $25,000. So I ended up winning like close to $20,000 this summer through my poker swapping, playing, piece buying.
Well, I'm curious too because like I had my experience of like playing all those days, and obviously I did have a good result, but as I mentioned, there was a lot of pain and frustration through that. What was your experience like playing every day, and like go in, how were you feeling?
I think that in general, I saw a tweet from, who was it from? I think it was Scott Seaver, where he talked about the reason, one of the ways that, basically how he's built in terms of poker. And he talked about how like it guts him when he doesn't perform well. And I thought a lot about that. And I think that that's actually one of the things that's always been a deterrent for me in sports and achieving like first place, getting that trophy, is that I, in general, don't care as much as I should. It hurts. Like I definitely, when you have those expectations and you don't final table and you get 73rd place, it hurts. But I think that the way that I'm built is I am able to take that in and move on. By the time I'm home having dinner with my wife, I'm like thinking about all the things I'm grateful for. Honestly, I'm like, Olga's pregnant. Like I didn't need to final table this tournament to like pay our bills, So I think I handled the ups and the downs probably better than I ever have in the past. And I think partially is because we're building this real estate business with Olga and it's starting to pay dividends. So we're not quite as reliant on me winning a lot of money like we were in the past. So that pressure is off a little bit, number one. And number two, there's so many other things going on in my life that it's hard for me to just be all in with living and dying with, I need this result. So I handled it much better than I have in years past. I remember in the years past, when I would bust the main event, I was inconsolable. Nobody would really know on the outside because I would internalize it. I would just go flip on Netflix and binge watch for 3 hours and not really talk to anyone and show up the next day and everything was fine. But it definitely hurt. Busting the main event has always been the hardest day for poker for me for the past 14, 15 years that I've been playing it. And this particular year when I busted the main event, it wasn't necessarily like that. I was moving on, and I actually played tournaments after the main event, and I usually never do. Like I was in there firing the 777, and I even considered playing the closer, but something came up. In years past, I would have never done that. I was like, main event was kind of the end of it for me. I was inconsolable, couldn't really hop back in there. Overall, it was fun. Overall, slightly disappointed that I was not able to turn a profit, but happy with my cash rate, happy with how I handled everything in the summer. And I'm actually going to share my full tournament stats on my Johnnie Vibes YouTube channel. I don't have them in front of me, so it's going to take me a couple days to get them together. But I'm going to be uploading on Johnnie Vibes YouTube channel again, and I'll share exactly what I've made in poker tournaments since I've been keeping track, since I've been playing poker tournaments. And basically what you did today for the World Series, But you have actually more data that you could share from basically the pandemic when you switched to tournaments.
Yeah, so I started playing tournaments right around the pandemic, like pretty exclusively, and got away from playing cash games. And actually, I really felt like the first, probably, if you go back to my Hen and Mob and see, like the first million that I made in Hen and Mob was all like very, very low volume, low buy-in stuff. So I think during that time I was very profitable, but I never really tracked it.
Yeah. You were extremely profitable because you would barely play, and you would have six-figure scores. So I always was surprised that you didn't go play more tournaments. And when you did make that switch during the pandemic, it was clear that you were going to have success.
Yeah, so the thing I would share about my run that I've had since 2021, beginning of 2021, is basically when I just started tracking it when I said I'm going to start playing tournaments full time. I played 466 total tournaments. That's
Wow.
a lot. 778 entries, and then I have an ROI of 108% and a in the money rate of 26%.
Yeah.
So it's been, one of the reasons why I thought it might be interesting to share that is that, like, I really struggle with a lot of the just like feeling good about poker. Like so many times, like I'll fly to Florida or wherever and like have, even if it's a good result, like I'm like there by myself without my family, and like I fly home just like stressed. Like the whole experience is like, there are obviously some good moments, but then it's just like I'm just like largely stressed playing poker full time as a tournament player. And like over the past 4 years, those are my stats. And like I always wonder, I'm like, man, so like I've actually performed well, and like my experience has largely been one of like a lot of stress, anxiety, frustration, and like how must it be for people that aren't, having similar results? And so I share it too because I want you to know that like no matter, at least from my perspective, I imagine people even that have better results than I do, they're like experiencing very much of the same things that I'm experiencing, and I'm sure I'm experiencing things that people that don't have the same results are experiencing. And I share all that because I think it's important for people to realize that, there is this human element that like I'm going to experience just like Jason Kuhn's going to experience, that like it's not just because someone is like further than you on their poker journey that they don't experience these like self-doubt, self-hatred, anxiety, stress. I have all of those things in moments, and if you ever feel those things, don't feel like, that you're alone or that you shouldn't be feeling those things, because I think they're perfectly natural, healthy things. And at the end of the day, I love poker so much that I'm just going to keep coming back. And I'm doing therapy now where I'm like every week, and it's like been just such a monumental change in my life. And it's like I do the things that I need to do to take care of myself off the table, so that way I can still maintain this healthy relationship with poker where I can go through and have these negative thoughts, difficult times, and come back feeling fresh, grateful to play, and
Yeah, it is the last day of the World Series. You have a flight to catch to Texas.
like pretty soon here.
Yeah, and I feel like it's always, the end of the World Series is always a pivotal moment where we kind of question, like, what's the next step? Are we gonna do this again next year? Are we?
Like EDC. It's my last EDC.
Yeah, because I firmly believe that professional poker, especially professional tournament poker, is a young man's game, and you've been in the game for 20 years, playing at a high level. So you're not someone that can just escape. You have to also evaluate every year, like, am I going to do this again next year? So I know that you've been back and forth on like what the next step is, but one thing that's clear is that you love playing poker. And one thing that I could see happening is you could relocate back to Vegas, start playing the Poker Go High Rollers, maybe put out a coaching product, maybe try to diversify a little bit, because Man, as a big brother, it's a struggle for me to see you going through the stress that you go through.
Yeah. Well, I will say, first of all, thank you for saying that. And I think you're going to be in a very similar boat to me. It's like, I want to do something where I can spend a lot more time at home and not be on the road so much, because my 2 children are young, 3 and 1, you know, and as much as I love playing poker, I feel that I feel the overwhelming sense that the thing I need to be doing is being at home with the family mainly. So I'm going to be doing probably more coaching, putting out more coaching material. We have an idea of something we might collaborate on, and I'm looking forward to that. Like it's in the poker arena. It's something I love. Being able to wake up next to my wife and kids is just something that is so important to me at this point in my life that, you know, you're probably not going to see me at Cherokee or Choctaw or wherever. So, yeah, I would say look out for that.
This podcast is not sponsored. I've decided that I don't want to partner with any, GG or WPT or do any of that. So if you want to support this podcast, drop a like on this video, drop a comment telling us that you enjoyed it, or you can get some Skill Game merch. That's a vote of confidence that says you want us to continue to upload. I'm going to continue to have these conversations. I'll do some solo episodes. I'll bring on some other guests as well to co-host. But enjoying the time that I have with you. Hopefully we can do this, me and you, again soon. But until then, enjoy being back with the family in Texas.
Yeah, and I'm sure the next time I see you, you'll be a father.
Yeah, got a son coming in a couple months.
Yeah.
We'll be back here on this channel, Skill Game Mafia, and I'll also be uploading on Johnnie Vibes. So we'll see you guys soon.